Are we ready, man?
Yes.
Are we recording?
Yes.
In that case, I will call this work session in order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Hagenow.
Present.
Councilmember Kerr. Here. Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Councilmember Parmet. Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Thisted. Here. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. Before the public comment period, so we can allow staff to, some staff to have a reasonable time to go home tonight. Mr. Town Manager, would you introduce our newest member of the town staff?
Yes, I would. Jess, can you step up, please? No, it's fine. You've all met Jess before. This is Jess Hertzberg, our new planner, and she is a superstar already, so we're not surprised, but we're certainly pleased. And,
Jess Hertzberg, and she's already acquired half of everything I know. 9 days.
I don't think that's true. Easy.
and the other half you don't want to know.
So in another 2 weeks, you have the other half of what Lindsay has to be superfluous.
Yeah, there's probably 5% that can never be known. Stop it there.
More than 1, 2.
Let's go back to work.
And again, welcome. The next item on the agenda is public comment period. And again, I'd like to invite anyone forward who would like to speak on anything that's in the work session. I'd like to remind you, you have 3 minutes to speak, and it can be on any topic we're considering in the work session. And please state your name and where you live or work in Keystone.
Hi, I'm Patty Blank, and I live in Mountain House. I'd like to remind you, before you start talking about having inspections, fire inspections, every condo and home in this town has to have an inspection before they are insured. So I think that you're going double things there. Besides that, another host brought up the fact that it would take a long time to get 2,000 inspections done before October 1st. The other thing is, there's 3 things on the agenda about changing, and I like the fact that you're doing a parking permit, but I don't understand the 3rd item. Something about design of complaint process. I hope that you cover that this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone online who would like to speak? Anyone else? I don't think so. In that case, I'll declare the public comment period closed and turn it over to the town manager to talk about the 2026 budget process.
And I will immediately turn this over to Heidi Fox, our finance director.
Hey, you mean Heidi Fox, so finance director, share my slideshow. One second. She's looking that up. John, are these meant to both be showing the same thing?
Not yet.
Not yet. Thank you for your patience. Is this going to be like a dual? Okay, I just wondered what
No,
it's meant to be pointing to the members of the public.
Will it? Oh, then it is meant to be.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it just,
sorry.
it updated last minute, so.
So,
Okay.
yeah, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, so
but-
these are basically for you guys in public ed. Okay.
Never look behind.
But I think you guys have enough TV, you can probably see.
We do.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Well, I'll go ahead, do you want me to go ahead and start while she's getting that up and going? Okay. All right, so this is an overview of the budget process to provoke discussion and answer any immediate questions that council may have. Some items may change based on council's direction, while others, like the statutory deadlines, are set in stone. We also need to comply with GASB and GAP standards. Certain recommendations might have come from the auditor or staff, but ultimately it's council's role to set policy and provide direction. Awesome. So this is our agenda, so this is what we'll go through. We'll go through why municipal budgeting matters, budget types and structures, legal framework and funding accounting, budget process phases, revenue sources and forecasting, reserves and balanced budget, council's role and responsibilities, and key takeaways. This slide shows the key reasons why budgeting is essential. So it drives policy and service. So the budget puts council's goals into actions like funding roads, public safety, workforce housing, to name a few. Ensures fiscal stability. It helps us live within our means and gives us a plan for the future. It's required by law, so we're legally required to adopt a balanced budget each year to operate. It also communicates priorities, so the budget shows residents what we're focused on and where the money goes. And guides capital investment and staffing. It tells us when we can start big projects or buy equipment, and then shows required staffing needs. So this slide gives us a quick overview of what's included in our operating budget. So we're just primarily focused on the operating budget. These are the costs that keep the town running day to day. So we have supports daily municipal operations, which covers everything. We need to function, staff, services, and supplies. Salaries and benefits, that includes wages, health insurance, and retirement. Maintenance and repairs are ongoing upkeep of buildings, trails, and equipment. Supplies and services, that can be anywhere from office supplies to software or contracted services. And then road maintenance, regular work to keep roads safe, patching, striping, and of course the big snow removal during the winter. And then public safety operations that supports our law enforcement contract. All right, so capital budget. So the capital budget is separate from the operating budget and focuses on long-term investments in our community. So some of them are used, so basically our capital is used for long-term investments. These are not everyday expenses, but they're bigger projects that last for many years of public facilities. Large-scale infrastructure projects, things like road reconstruction, park development or sidewalks, land acquisition. So this is buying property for future town use like workforce housing or a new facility. Buildings and facilities. So this could be for like a new town building or major improvements to an existing one. Equipment purchases, obviously larger items like vehicles, snow plows, IT systems, just non-routine supplies, and then public safety infrastructure. Next one will show our restricted budget funds. These are restricted funds that can only be used for specific purposes. They're by legal contracts or by voter restricted. We do have one other fund that needs to be added to this. The nicotine tax, once that's signed, that'll have to be a special or a restricted budget fund. So you'll see that in the we'll have to do a supplemental budget for 25 once we get everything signed in-house, and then you'll see it also in the 26 budget. So we have the conservation fund, and this funding supports stuff like open space, trail systems, park development, environmental efforts. Just cannot, they're very specific on what you can use it for, but definitely not for general operations. And those funds are received from the state of Colorado through the lottery revenues that they receive. So we'll start getting those. The state's fiscal year starts July 1st, so our first revenue deposit will be next month. So that should be exciting. Lodging tax fund, workforce housing fund, and that's funded by dedicated sales tax through Summit County Housing Authority, and it's only used for affordable housing needs. And then lodging tax revenues for overnight visitors. In this fund, and this is straight from the ballot language, this fund supports capital infrastructure projects, Highway 6 safety and maintenance, such as improvements to streets and trails, and then public safety. All right, legal framework and accounting basics. So our budget process has to follow legal and accounting rules set by the state and our own town charter. So Colorado Budget Law, Title 29, is what we have to follow, and our town charter. So we're required to adopt a balanced budget every year and follow procedures for amending amendments and hearings. So we talked about we'll have to do an amendment for the 25 budget. So we use funded accounting, and that's based on GASB, GAAP, and GFOA standards. So we use fund accounting, which treats each fund separately. It's kind of like having a separate checkbook for each fund, and it has to balance. And we follow national standards to stay transparent and consistent. Each fund must be balanced and appropriated. So we can't spend more money than we appropriate. Every fund has to be balanced on its own. And our fiscal year equals our calendar year, which is nice. So January through December is our budget year, just like our calendar, so that's easy to remember. And then if you're curious on what GASB stands for, that stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board. GAAP, if you're not familiar with that, is generally accepted accounting principles, and then GFOA is Government Finance Officers Association. All right, the budget process overview. So on this slide, it'll show the key steps in the town's annual budget process. So we start with setting strategic goals, and then followed by forecasting revenues. Followed by forecasting revenues and gathering department requests. From there, we build a draft budget. We present it to council and the public, and then it's adopted. And the deadline for the state requirement is by December 15th. And then after adoption, we continue to monitor our budget with our financials, and then if needed, we can amend it. And then amended budget process is the same as basically adopting a budget. It has to be a public meeting, and then appropriations set. So this shows what we have proposed for the 26 budget development calendar. And just so you guys all know, as a new town, we are, even to this date, still gathering information to revise and update the 25 budgets. We're all aware of that. We would love to have all the information in our hands right now so we can give you guys more information, but we're waiting on others to do so. So the process is taking a little bit longer, but we are getting there little by little. And so once we have the 25 budget nailed down, that's really going to help us develop the 26 budget. And so then we'll be able to forecast revenues and expenditures, we'll be able to draft the budget, and then we'll be able to present it for your review. September is our goal for that, so it is enough time to develop it internally before we make it public. When you guys do see the drafted budget, know that the line items are expected to change. So they're not set in stone, and it's based on public comment, based on what you guys want, and then some of the information we won't get, you know, until we get closer to the year. So once we get finalized numbers, we'll update the budget. So when you do see that, don't think it's set in stone. And then we have to have it approved by December 15th. So the last time that we can do that would be that second meeting, or the first meeting in December. All right, so we use modified accrual accounting. Does anybody know what that is? I think, is it CML? CML has definitions like on their website of all like the government terms. And I haven't looked at it recently, but at one time they had wrote, who knows? So what modified accrual is, basically, it makes the best sense when you talk about like our sales tax revenues. Basically for us to count revenues, it has to be both measurable and available. So the simplest way to like sort of explain that is with sales tax. So we get our sales tax revenues 2 months behind. So if people collect sales tax in January, then they report it to the state in February, and then the state reports it to us in March. So then the simplest way and the best approach is for us to take our January sales tax revenues when we get them in March and recognize them. And it's not like full accrual where you would estimate what you might get in January, because then that skews the numbers. And if you guys look at our last financials from MMW, you'll see how that impacts the financials. So once we get those in the house, we will be fully on a modified accrual basis, which will help you guys realize what we actually have. Which will be nice. Basically, the approach avoids, estimating, gives us a clear picture of real cash flow and helps keep our fund balances accurate and reliable. And then it also helps us at year end. So basically, we have a 60-day window. So when December sales tax, when we don't get until February, it's recorded for the current year. And so that's why end of year financials take a little bit longer, and the audited financials take longer after that, to make sure we capture those revenues. Expenditures are recognized when they're incurred and not when they're paid. And that's, so that's a little bit of why government financing financials are a little bit different than like your day-to-day business operations.
One quick question, just for clarity. So as we transition from recognition of the revenue from pure accrual to the modified accrual, that will mean that the sales tax revenue for next year will be significantly lower than a normal year, because we won't have January and February revenue, right?
Well, it'll just be shown after February. So basically, when you look at the December financials, it's not going to have 2 months of sales tax revenues until after January and February. And so that's when the audited financials, when we present those to you, they'll have those revenues.
I guess what my point is that in January and February, we won't show for 26 any sales tax revenue because we will not have received it yet.
Until March.
That the actual receipt of those dollars will be credited back into 2025.
Right, yeah. All right, and that's why, that's why we show those sales tax, well, all the tax revenues that we get at each month for you guys, so you can see. And you can kind of get, I don't know, our world, the way it is now, it's tough to anticipate what tomorrow might hold, where like, there was a time in our life where you could project, 2%, 3% increase, for inflation each year. That is no longer our case. And since we're a new town, we only have a little over a year of actual revenues. So that's what we compare year to year, just to kind of see where we are. And when we compare this year to last year, it's been an interesting flow, because last month, let's see, April sales tax was under by 16%, but we just received May sales tax, which is up 5% from last year. So it's in January and February, in March, we're up from last year. So we've only had 1 month that we received less sales tax than the previous year. But we'll continue to monitor that as we go, and then next council meeting, you guys will see that too.
So question, when you present the revenue by month, some of the graphs you've shown us in the past, that's really reflected that month, even though we don't get the cash flow coming.
Right,
It's not a cash flow, it's strictly a
right,
balance sheet.
right, yes. So next meeting, you guys will be, for sales tax, you'll be looking at May's. You'll be looking at May's sales tax. Lodging tax will be June's, because we collect that in-house, so we can show it the next month.
So it's our financials are really a snapshot of where we exist at that moment, taking out monies that are owed to us.
Yeah. It's like a cash flow or something.
All right, so revenue sources. So our revenue sources between all of our funds are they're from sales tax, they're from the multi-jurisdiction housing authority, which we get through Summit Housing Authority, lodging tax, and then vehicle use taxes. And then the vehicle use taxes distributed by the county the following month. We also get intergovernmental revenues, and those come from HUFT, R&D tax, and grants. So HUFT is Highway Users Tax Fund, and that comes from the state of Colorado, which we will start receiving. Again, our fiscal year starts July, so we'll get our first revenue stream in August from that. Any grants that we have and then shared taxes like the road and bridge come from the county.
And conservation lottery funds would be that kind of group.
It would, yes. So then we also get revenue from licenses, permits, and franchise fees. So this includes business licenses, short-term rental licenses, building permits, and then we do have a utility franchise fee, which, interesting enough, we haven't been getting those revenues. And so I reached out.
I thought we did. We didn't do the.
We did for Comcast.
Comcast. Okay.
Yeah. So for Comcast, we have an agreement with them. I've been working with them to try to get it. They actually just sent me an email, like probably about an hour ago, that said they finally figured it out. They were sending our checks to Summit County rather than us. So we'll start to see, they're going to cut us a check, and then they're going to work with Summit County on getting reimbursed for that.
We don't have to fight that.
Yeah. So I would have never thought that it would have gone to Summit County since they signed the agreement with us, but It is. And then, of course, interest earned. So we do earn interest on our reserves by investing them safely, which provides additional revenues. So forecasting revenues. So when we forecast our revenues, as a new town, as we discussed earlier, we're still building our revenue history. I don't know, it could be one way or the other, but basically we know what our seasonal patterns are, which is nice. So we know that we have 4 months of high sales tax revenues and the rest are a little bit slower, so that's going to help us. And we do have enough data to come to a forecast for both our sales tax and lodging tax. What's tough is a big part of our revenue kind of depends on visitors. And then snow levels, the travel trends, or the economic slowdowns can all affect collections. And then we use year-to-date actuals and then prior year comparisons to help us with that forecasting. We also look at similar towns and then just what's happening in this county in general to see what the other local governments are seeing. We like to be conservative, so when you see those revenue figures, we are going to be conservative when we forecast those. All right, so this slide covers 3 key pieces that guide how we manage money responsible. So we have a reserve policy, taper, and a balanced budget. So our reserve policy is also in our packet for council to discuss after this. So once you guys set the reserve levels, this will be incorporated into our budget. Tabor emergency reserves. This is a state law and it requires us to set aside 3% of our expenditures, and it does not include any federal or capital funds, but it's set aside for emergencies only, and it has to be in cash or something liquid. So they're very specific on how we handle that Tabor reserve. Balanced budget, so we can't budget or spend more than we bring in, including our beginning fund balance. So at the end of the budget, we have to make sure it balances and that we have enough funds. And that goes with the appropriation. And once we appropriate the funds, we can't spend more than what we tell the public that we're going to spend. And that just helps us, we have to be compliant with all the laws that we have to follow, and then it helps us avoid overspending.
Excuse me, could you tell me again? Tabor is 3% of what?
The expenditures. So basically our operating expenditures, not including grants. To simplify it. And I think I covered that slide, right?
So if we have a grant, the expenditures that are made associated with that grant don't go into that calculation?
It's not included. Or it's not required to be included. You can include it if you want a higher Tabor reserve.
It is part of our total revenue.
Right.
As far as Tabor refunds.
But grants are the only thing that you don't know the 3% grants? Or are there other?
No,
those other funds?
yeah, I mean, there's other stuff that's excluded from that, but that's the biggest one.
I mean, tobacco, these other funds, all those.
Well, so, so this isn't the general fund, and only the general fund that the Tabor reserves is required. Yeah, the other funds are exempt from Tabor reserve requirements. All right, so council's role, this is what you guys were waiting for. So basically, at a high level, your guys' role in the budget is to set direction, and to stay engaged and provide oversight. So once staff knows what your vision is and what you want to accomplish for the next year, it helps us build that budget on top of our normal operating expenditures. So basically, your goal is to guide us where we want to focus our resources. And that can be anywhere from like public safety to housing to infrastructure. With that being said, if your goal has to match what we have in funds. So you can't say you want to build, something if we don't have the funds. But we can definitely, if you guys have a big project in mind, we can figure out how long it's going to take us to get there before we can start that project, or do some other financing alternatives. One of the things in government financing is we're not allowed to acquire debt without voter approval. And that's like every other year or something that can go on a ballot, right?
Yeah, there are type of restrictions on tax increases.
So there's a lot that goes into that if you guys want to do a big project and acquire
It
debt.
has to be a general election.
It can be either an April election for us, or it can be a November election, as long as the November election is general election.
All right, so then when you review the budget and you guys approve the budget, and then the financials are presented to you each month, ask questions. Ask like if it's approved in the budget, and if it's not approved in the budget, where are those funds going to come from? Are we going to swap it out for something else, or are we going to prepare, or are we going to take it from our what we have set aside in reserves? And then if it's over our appropriation, then we have to do a supplemental budget.
And if I may jump in, we don't ever present anything that has not been approved in the budget without telling you we're presenting something not approved in the budget that we're requiring supplemental.
And with that, like the appropriations at the state level, they don't care about our line items. We can go over in our line items, but the bottom appropriation in the general, in our funds is what they care about. So, if you have a line item, like let's say $100,000, and for whatever reason, we're not going to spend that, but then there's another line item that you're going to go over a little bit, and it balances out so we don't go over those appropriations, then we're fine. So then, once you guys adopt the budget, we just monitor it through the year, and then if we need to do any amendments, like we discussed for the 25 budget, which we'll have to do to at least incorporate the new fund of the nicotine tax, then we'll have to have a public hearing, and then you guys will have to approve that as well. And then just keep monitoring the financials. We do each month, and we present it to you. And part of my job is if I see something that you need to be aware of, I will call it out, so you guys know where we are. All right, so these are just some of the changes that we were going to propose to you for the 26 budget. And so the idea of grouping all staff under the administrative services, except for public works, came from a discussion from our auditors. Their recommendation, of course, was to streamline our budget since we're a very small municipality. Our line items are kind of excessive, and they should be grouped together. So that was one of their suggestions, which will make reporting and management easier. But with that being said, I did hear back from the mayor, and he does want to separate the community development wages into a community development line, and that's totally fine. This is the other, there is no, when it comes to this, there is no really right or wrong approach. It's really a policy decision from you guys, on how you guys want to see everything. But it does, like grouping things together, just simplifies our budget. But we can definitely break things out too, so you guys can see it as a standalone. So that really comes from you guys.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I saw where you pulled out public works salaries, et cetera, but you're also talking about, what was the one that you just?
Community development. Yeah.
I think we should, just talk, why do we want them broken out, just so, what's the reason?
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to get into. The first of it's community facing. It provides a service to the community, both in long-term planning as well as long-term planning as well as building permitting in those functions. It's not a huge dollar guy. All the other towns in Summit except Blue River do have it separately broken out, and the reason Blue River doesn't is they have no staff and functions in that area. They have a function, but that's all performed by the town manager. It then puts that department director at the same level, basically, in budget management as all the other directors as well. So that was my rationale for asking the question. I was going to raise the point today and find out what the other council members thought.
Well, one more quick question. Why wouldn't like road maintenance and snow plowing be under public works then?
It is. It is so the reason that public works is separate is because Gatsby makes me call it out separate, but road maintenance is under the public works department. We just want to, right now it's broken out into like 3 or 4 different categories, and it just needs to be one road maintenance and snow plow, and not like by I don't know. I don't have the budget right
Vendor,
Yeah.
Okay, so that I was reading that was a separate
Yeah.
budget item, but it's under public works.
It is under public works, yes. Mm-hmm.
And for instance, trails and open space maintenance would also be in the public works and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what does council think about community development?
Question, comment?
Well, let me back into that. So if we take the recommendation that we put all the wages, all the personnel wages and costs under administrative services, except for the several people in community development, and except for the public works, the net effect is simply that we are pulling the town clerk and putting that person under, I'm not sure what we gain by doing half of one and half of the other.
I can answer that. So, public works, we don't have a choice. Gatsby requires it be a separate line item in the budget. Now, what the mayor says about community development makes perfect sense because they provide, well, a large function of community development is providing a service that we charge for. The reason that it would make sense to group them is if you have, because you have people like the town clerk, the town manager, the town financial director, who all of our costs will come out of the administrative budget, but part of our services will go to serve the community development budget. And to be absolutely accurate and clear, we'd have to allocate a level of our expenses into the community development budget to show that service that Heike's putting together to manage the community development budget, or I'm putting together to manage the department.
Are you recommending doing that? I mean, that kind of, where 10% of your time goes here?
I would recommend we separate if we had a large department that, at this point, our department's small and most of their work, we do some public facing work, but most of their work is really in the planning arena, right? And not planning individual site planning, but true community development arena. Comp plan, strategic plan, issues like that. It's not the end of the world to go either way, but.
Silverthorne has a small community development staff as well, and they've broken it out. Their staff is probably about the same size as ours, when you look at it. Their head of community development is also dual-headed as the deputy town manager as well, and they moved the IT function into that area. In the Silverthorne budget, they specifically call out the long-term planning really as community-facing versus internal. Depends how you want it.
Can somebody explain to me why community-facing changes the budget? I don't get this. The line item, what has that got to do with anything?
Well, it goes back to the bottom, the last sentence under the administrative organization, that rather than direct services to the public. When I say communities, basically they consider that a direct service to the public.
I would consider that a ridiculous way to approach it, but, yeah. But
You provide direct service. The town clerk
Yeah.
provides direct service.
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily see it,
I don't know what we're getting.
where did you pull that?
Well, it's from Gatsby. It's one of
Okay.
their requirements, and, I don't know, like a lot of things from Gatsby, some of it makes sense and some of it doesn't make sense. The good thing with like the community development, you know, it's up to us to decide how we want to approach that in the budget. They don't have a requirement for that, which is helpful in, if we were going to grow our community development positions, then I would, then the answer would be yes, because part of our budget standards is to make sure that whatever we set, like for this year, makes sense like 10 years from now. Because when we start combining and separating things every year, then it doesn't make it clear to follow. So whatever council decides, like think of what this town's going to look like in 10 years and what the staff is going to look like. And from my perspective, it just doesn't really matter. And the auditor is going to combine them when they do the audited financials anyhow. So if we separate it out for our own benefit, that's fine. But when they do the audited financials, they're going to combine it under general government.
And right there, you were specifically talking about whether community development is under administrative services or not, right?
Yeah.
I'm still struggling
And
with
it's
why
just-
we're not, why we have to lump all the administrative services, what we're gaining there. I think we lose visibility of how the funds are being expended if we lump attorney and finance and town manager and assistant and town clerk into one big.
And part of that too is like when you consider like, you know, what a small staff we have, when you break everybody's individual, like, you know, it specifies what our salaries are. And then on top of that, if we don't lump them together, then we have to do cost allocation, to each one of them, which just causes more work, and, it's just, then it becomes kind of unclear, because then why are you taking 25% of the town manager's salary and, putting it 10% to public works, 10% to, community development, 5% to finance. So it gets a little, it gets a little messy and clunky, and that's why generally lump the salaries together.
Now, are you lumping all salaries together? Or just for instance, is the public works salary lumped together?
No, public works has to be called out separately for gas.
Then then I don't buy the argument that the town manager would have to allocate his time. His function is to oversee all of those departments. And you would either be, you would have to, by your argument, he would then have to be allocating a portion of his time to public works because he oversees that department. And I don't see why he would have to do that, since his responsibility is to oversee all departments.
And it's just, and again, it's part of Gatsby, when they call out cost allocations to each department.
But I don't see that in other town budgets.
Well, the other town budgets you see are not necessarily, they're not, you won't see it in our budget either.
Because it's behind the scenes.
Because it's a cost it's a process that's dealt with in presenting the financials. You don't actually ever see it called out.
So if I were to talk to the Breck town manager, she would confirm that she is charging directly to each of those departments as she oversees them?
I would assume so, and certainly for every enterprise.
I would be shocked. I would be shocked.
The county's not there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The question I think on the table is, on this page, we're talking about whether we're going to have 4 or 3, whether it's administrative services, communication development possibly, community, public works, and then the capital. So the real argument is community development be under admin. Is right?
Right, that's the question.
Yeah, but I'm also asking why we're breaking out, why we're lumping up the administrative stuff. You say Gatsby recommends it. Remind us what Gatsby is?
We're getting into that. Not everyone in the world knows exactly what everyone in town is getting paid. That's precisely right.
It simplifies the budget processing, so we don't have so
We
many
have
lines.
pay ranges that are.
So is there a way to pull the wages, et cetera, of the community development personnel into administrative and everything else in community development stay as a separate?
Yeah, we're just talking about wages, we're not talking about the other line
Oh, that
items.
makes sense. Either all or nothing, except for the public works. And when you said Gatsby requires it. Gatsby is what again?
Yeah,
It's law
Yeah.
or best practice?
no, it's law.
Okay, then I think we do what's law.
All right, so all you're talking about in community development is the wages? It's not the other expenses that are in it?
Exactly, yeah,
That's a whole different story.
Yep, it's just the wages and the line items associated to wages, so it would include like taxes and benefits.
So you're back to.
And that, as long as the functions that they're performing are is a separate area of co-equal level of public works, I'm happy. I just was concerned that you were mixing in all the stuff that they're doing with building permits and everything else mixed in administrative, and that's why I'm good.
No, and I mean, there's things like, like postage and local travel, because we have that in every single, we have that in clerk, we have that in finance, and that'll be lumped together unless it needs to be separate, like community development, if,
Reimbursed.
right, so if they're doing a development for, like a local, developer, those items are tracked separately because we get reimbursed for what we.
But you would have, for instance, there's some professional services line in there, community development, you have
Yes.
some planning dollars in there. All of those would be listed as a separate line,
Right.
as a separate department level, just like public works.
Yes.
Thank you. Would those salaries be public information through a public information request?
The salary range.
The salary range, so we're talking about removing that for privacy or whatever reasons, right? But so if a citizen were to request the, say, pay of the town manager, they would get a range, not the exact.
No, unfortunately, mine is very public.
There's a contract.
I have a contract.
Okay, so if a citizen were to request the pay range of a clerk or a deputy clerk, would that be a range or a specific line?
A range.
Okay, thank you.
Given that, I remove my suggestion. Since you have questions.
All right, well, you guys got to learn a whole lot more than you probably ever wanted to know.
I did have one other question, it's like somewhat aligned. I've participated, on some other boards, and it's kind of hard for everybody to be up to date on this. I'm just throwing out there the idea of a subcommittee on the board for finance and budget. I'm just throwing it out there.
If I may throw out there, I think the most important thing you guys do is approve the budget. I think all of you need to review the budget in depth. I don't think you need to be writing the budget statutorily. That's my job and the finance director's job. That's the law. I'm concerned that people will not pay the attention they need to on what I consider one of their most important roles as a council member. Council. If you had a budget subcommittee.
The council would then decide they've taken care of it and then we don't all.
Frankly, our budget is pretty simple.
Yeah, if we were putting together a Breckenridge 500-page budget, it's a different story.
We're a startup, it makes a difference.
Go ahead.
I don't want to open another can of worms, and I'm not going to pretend to completely understand the nature of this, but you're recommending that we combine road maintenance and snow plowing into one line item. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't eventually be, you could break it out if we wanted to know.
That's not what we're.
Well, it's like right now, it's like 4 line items.
It reads that way. I see how you read it. But it will be snow plowing reads as 4 or 5 different lines.
So you're putting all snow
All
plowing.
snow plowing,
That makes
all
sense. I just think it's important
standard
to
road
keep those
maintenance.
so separately,
Yes.
separate because of our climate and making
Yeah.
sure we can keep an eye on road maintenance versus snow plow, very different.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like, I mean, anytime, like, any of our line items, and it's just made for simplicity, so you just look at a line item and you know where we are, versus like year-to-date versus budgets. You guys ever want anything like broken down, like what makes them up? We can provide that for you. That's easy, and that's what fabulous accounting system does for us. Yes.
So is everyone basically happy with the structure, top level structure?
And it'll probably make better sense, like, once you actually, like, see it in front of you.
But this gives her guidance to be able to start laying out the budget.
Well, right. Well, it was important for me to to convey this to you so you guys knew what to expect. Like, in September when you guys see the draft, you're not like totally shocked what's going on. But again, when you guys do see the draft in September, it's not a final and it's very wet, so we can modify anything based on your guys' direction as a whole.
Could you run down those key dates one more time? When is the public hearing? Is this already set?
Not set yet.
I thought I saw something draw, I guess.
Well, so basically, okay, so in October is when the public hearings will be.
You get the first budget draft in September.
Okay.
August is when we're finalizing the budget.
Internally.
Internally,
Okay.
And then September is when you guys get to see it, and then you guys can, talk about it, discuss it, we can modify it, and then we'll have like a final draft in October, and that's when the public will get to weigh in.
Okay. It might get pushed till November, the public hearing, and then the input in the work sessions. And the public can weigh, even with a public hearing, the public can weigh in on the budget and has a legal right to weigh in on the budget until the moment it's adopted by the council. They're not limited to the hearing. We prefer they bring it up in the hearing.
All right, so key takeaways. So basically here are the main points to remember as we go into the budget season. So our budget equals policy plus financial plan. It's not just numbers, so don't be scared of it, because it reflects our values and what we're choosing to invest in. Council's role basically equals goal setting, approval, and monitoring. So council leads the process, you help set direction, approve the plan, and then keep tabs on how we're doing. Adopt by December 15th per statute. State law sets this deadline. We need to adopt the budget by then to stay in compliance. And then reserves and flexibility build resilience. We'll talk a little bit more about our reserve policy. But yeah, strong reserves and a conservative approach gives us the flexibility to handle the unexpected. So we don't want to tie up all of our money. We want to have some flexibility in there. And then questions and discussion.
I have two quick questions. Earlier you mentioned that, actually I have three, sorry. You mentioned that when we look at revenue and budgeting for next year, you'll be using a conservative approach. Can you tell us what that means?
So really what we're going to look at is we're going to look at what our revenue, what we received in revenues for this year versus last year, and then make a conservative approach. We're not going to, so I can tell you right now, we are not going to increase our revenues.
Okay, so you're looking at a flat.
We're looking
Best
at
case.
best case is flat.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
For. Okay.
And a lot of that, and I can't really fully answer that right now because we're
I understand.
we're still waiting to see.
But your going-in position is, okay. The second question is, both the conservation funds and the highway fund are to start as of 1st of July this year. And I apologize for this question, because I think you've referenced it before, but I didn't have my money hat on then. Why did it start on the 1st of July in 2024? Did we not ask for it?
Now the highway user tax fund is based on the roads we have on January 1st.
Okay, got it. That reminds me. And what about the conservation?
Yeah,
funds?
and that's based on population as of January 1st. So we, so yeah, so,
In
So we
24.
didn't
we
have
had
a
no
full year,
population.
got it, perfect. One more question?
Go ahead.
What was it? Oh, what's Colorado policy about making a budget publicly available?
it's publicly available, it's on our website.
I can't find it. Where is it?
Should be under finance, so let's just go to the.
I'm very embarrassed here on this. I'm looking at all the wrong places.
Budget, we have, it's on the bottom of the finance page.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions?
One comment, when it goes for public comments, I mean, we don't just throw it at the meeting. I assume they'll get it on the website earlier.
It'll be in the packet in the September meetings when it's given to the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then even if, you know, if somebody doesn't want to look through our website to find our council packets, they can always request it as well.
Any more questions on this topic?
The presentation was really pretty and clear. Thank you for that. I liked it. Thank you for that. It's all the time.
All right.
It's awesome.
Let's move on to the proposed investment policy.
Do I have to end my session, so?
You just have to hit like stop sharing. There you go.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
point of information for all.
So as I was coming back from my other duties to the community, apologies for being late, I was able to zoom in and listen to most of that. And this is just a piece of information. It's so hard to tell when you're sitting in this room because we all can hear each other. We even hear some amplification to this. But it was just astounding how different the sound quality was for each person who was speaking.
When your mic's off, they can't hear it. It just sounds like you're talking through like a paper tube. If your mic's on and it's up here, it's not much better. Even if you're getting a little bit of boost, you can hear it.
If this thing is at your lips, but not very close, just a little bit. It's super clear. It's super clear. So if you want our constituents on to be able to understand this clearly, if we do it that way, it'll be crystal clear.
Good to know. Thank you. Oh, I just turned it off. All right, so we have our proposed investment policy in front of you. So to go through it. All right. So the purpose of this investment policy is to establish guidelines for the prudent investment of the town's funds in accordance with Colorado law, which is CRS 2475-601, and to ensure the preservation of capital liquidity and yield. And to give you guys some bases, this mimics the Colorado statute and doesn't, has everything, it has exactly the exact same requirements. So the scope, so the policy applies to all financial assets of the town of Keystone, including but not limited to general fund, special revenue funds, capital project funds, debt service funds, enterprise funds, and any other funds managed by the town. The definitions I will skip. So policy, and that's page 3 of 6. So the objectives, so this is in priority order. Is when we invest, we want to make sure that safety is number one. So preservation of principal is the foremost objective in this. Second would be liquidity. Funds shall remain sufficiently liquid to meet operating needs. And then third would be the yield. So investments shall seek reasonable market returns after safety and liquidity are addressed. Standard of care, so the town's manager is designated as the investment officer. Investments shall be made with judgment and care under the prudent investor rule, and then no investments shall be made that violate state statute or this policy. Authorized investments, so in accordance with the state statute, the following investments are permitted. So obligations of the U.S. Treasury and U.S. government agencies, certificates of deposit, local government investment pools, such as Colorado Trust and C-Safe, and we do have a Colorado Trust account, and that's where our investments sit currently, and probably for the foreseeable future. Repurchase agreements with qualified dealers, but they have to be fully collateralized. Municipal securities, they prefer that it's Colorado issued. And then money market mutual funds. So prohibited investments include equities, derivatives, instruments, and securities below investment grade. So basically, they just want to make sure that if we invest any of the public funds, that it is safe, and we're not gambling with it. So diversification and maturity. So we want to diversify by institution, maturity, and type.
Does that mean we can't have all of our funds in Colorado Trust?
No, we can have all of our funds in Colorado Trust because it's probably the safest place to put our funds. But like if we were going to do like CDs or other investments as indicated above, we would want to diversify them.
So because Colorado Trust is already diversified, that's why.
Yeah.
I would recommend we modify the wording there so that it's really clear. I know when I read it, Colorado Trust is an entity we're providing the funds to.
And then maturities would be structured to match cash flow needs. Weighted average maturity of the portfolio shall not exceed 3 years unless authorized by council for long-term reserves. Collateralization, all deposits exceeding FDIC limits must be collateralized in accordance with the Public Deposit Protection Act, also known as PDPA, and we use First Bank, and they do comply with PDPA and are in compliance.
Does that mean any CDs that we invest with also have to be fully collateralized?
Yes. And that just protects us in case like a bank goes, yeah. All right, so this is it. Hold on. Safekeeping in custody. So all security shall be held by a third-party custodian in the town's name. So nothing can't be in any other than our name. Physically delivery or third-party custody is required for all marketable securities. Basically, this means the town's investment must be securely held by an independent financial institution, not the broker who sold them, registered to the town and protected from misuse or fraud. Broker-dealer requirements, all brokers, financial institutions, and dealers must, so once this policy is approved, be licensed in the state of Colorado, provide annual certification of compliance with the town's investment policy, and meet capital liquidity standards set by the SEC and FINRA. Reporting and review. So quarterly reports will be submitted to the town manager and council showing holdings, market value, and performance. And then this policy shall be reviewed annually and updated as needed. Ethics and conflicts of interest. Employees involved in the investment process shall avoid any actual or perceived conflict of interest. Disclosure of any personal financial interest in any institution doing business with the town is required. And there's glossary, and then procedures is the finance director shall maintain a list of approved institutions. All investment transactions must be documented and complied with this policy, and then all securities shall be tracked in the town's accounting system and subject to internal and external audit.
If I may weigh in a little bit, these are all practices we are doing and following. This just makes it possible by adopting it as an official policy for the auditor to say, yes, the town is following its policies and doing everything required by the law.
Any questions? Or a quick one. On ethics, the disclosure of any personal financial interest in the institution doing this. So is that anybody in the town that banks at that bank? Do they disclose that?
No. No. So it would be like if John and I had a financial interest, if any, with any of the institutions. So like if we were, I guess, maybe like a board member or a stockholder in First Bank, then we would have to disclose that.
Carol?
Audits. Is the investment audit system, is that done the same time as the town financial audit? Is it all, or is it separate?
No, it's done with our annual audit.
Okay, about frequently asked question number 4. Decisions about investments are made by the finance director under the oversight of the town manager and council. How does that work? What are you envisioning? Just so we know what to expect.
Well, John and I are under the, we agree on this, that we will, as far, Colorado Trust has our money right now, and that's where we invest. It's very safe for governments to invest there, and they have an investment pool that's really specifically for local governments, and that's where we're going to keep our money. I don't see us investing in anything other than that. If we end up having like a huge reserve policy, then we will discuss it with council and probably get an investor to help us with our.
Okay, I'm not trying to make it complicated. John, you came to us originally with the concept of doing this, and I understand that they are managing the funds right now. We are not making decisions during the process, but I just wanted to clarify that.
And
You'd keep us up to date.
If we were to make a change out of Colo Trust to some other fund or some other investment that met all of this, it technically, Hudson would take care of the transfers, I'd sign off, but we would come to you as a council before doing something dramatic.
Makes sense. Perfect, thanks.
I guess since Carol brought this up, I'll quibble with the answer to the question number 4. The actual person who decides to invest the town's funds is the town manager. He's the investment officer. And it's with the recommendation of the finance director.
Yeah.
So the finance director doesn't make the decision. The investment officer makes that decision.
And
I think that's what I heard, the distinction, because it says, how does it say that? That it would be made with the oversight of town manager and council. I agree with what the mayor said about the town manager's role. And I think what you have clarified is you give us a heads up as to what you're planning.
And to tell the truth, the way we're set up, our finance director cannot make any actual decisions about how we spend our.
Okay.
I understand. But if that question is part of the public record when it comes to us, I'd like to see it changed to reflect that you're actually making those decisions based on the recommendation of the finance director and the oversight of the rest. All right. Anything else on investment policy? Then let's move on to discussion of reserve policy.
All right, so the purpose of the policy is to establish a consistent and transparent framework for maintaining adequate fund balances in the town's key operations and capital funds. This policy promotes financial stability, improves long-term planning, and ensures that adequate resources are available in the event of emergencies or revenue shortfalls. So this policy, so right now it's written, this policy applies to the general fund and then the capital reserve fund. They're really like one and the same. I know that the mayor wanted to keep them.
I asked a question.
Okay, ask a question.
Please don't keep saying you wanted to.
He asked a question about that. So when we get to that, you guys can discuss that and how you want to.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression to the council that I'm trying to drive your decision and drive the package, because I'm not.
Yeah, well, so basically, I mean, so the policies are, when we put them in front of you, they're just a starting point to start the conversation. And how we put things in there is by guidance from like GFOA, GASB, and then researching other policies from other local municipalities. And then from there, it's a discussion as a whole from the council. You guys are the ones who approve that. So this is the time for you guys to make any adjustments, bring up any questions, or just, drive the conversation to come up with a policy that meets your goals.
Did you have something, John?
Yes, and I'd like to say this with as much respect as possible, but I would ask that we have a high-level overview of the policy here. It seems like we're reading this verbatim,
Right.
And I think it's all of our responsibilities to read this ahead of time and ask questions about it. I think that this document is absolutely fascinating and informative, but I would ask that we just maybe have some time to ask questions and allow some significant time in the work session to be focused on STRs in particular and not necessarily these very well spelled out documents.
Yeah.
Great, and what, start?
Yeah. Throw out your questions.
So we're really talking about two funds that will put reserves. You're looking at 25%, which is higher than minimums. These funds, are they required, or is this just good practice?
It's good practice.
Look, are these separate funds, or are they just the requirements that we have to maintain X amount of dollars in these funds as a minimum?
Yeah, it's a policy standard set by council, so we know that we have adequate reserves. You don't have to have, it's not required to have a policy, it's just best practice. And then what it helps is when we do our budget, we know that we're going to have X amount that should be in reserves. So that it's not all used in 1 year.
Okay, the question that's associated. The 3% taper, is that on top of this then as well? Or is that part of the general fund?
No, that's out of the general fund and that's included in the budget, so they're two separate, they're two separate things. So the 25% would include the taper. Yep.
While I was reading this, it seemed to me that there was a lot of focus on this reserve fund, in particular because our town is such focused on a transient or tourism focused market, and so would it be accurate to say that part of the reason for the fund being above the recommended being that we are driven by a very volatile market at times?
Absolutely, that's 100%. And to tell the truth, my own personal desires and practices that we set a minimum reserve balance here that sends a signal that the council feels we need to save for rainy days. I recommend we set it a lot lower than I actually want it to be, because I want that flexibility. I would love to have a year's operating expense in the bank and still be able to pay everything that we want to get done and do. That would be my dream. And in practice, I'll try to get us to there. But this setting a policy sends a message that we're not going to be spending willy-nilly. We are looking forward to the future in our budget processing, and we understand that emergencies and downturns can happen. That's why we've adopted this policy that our staff is adhering to as they put together the budget. And the budgets you'll see, I expect will have much larger than what our minimum adopted is. But there might be a time when we want to spend that, and we don't want to be constrained by.
Which, and I appreciate that perspective, and I fully support that. I think in my perspective, right, we're in a kind of unique situation where an emergency hits us, and I'll use COVID as an example, right? Not only are we going to see a significant downturn in revenue, but very likely we should see an increase in expenditures in support of our businesses and towns and things that need to happen. So it'd be a double whammy, and I think I see there. And so I appreciate that perspective that you brought to this process.
Yeah, and actually I think if we would see a lesser expenditure if our revenue is down. Because there are just things that if we don't have people traveling our roads, if we don't need police service at town festivals, issues like that.
Although given the public safety relationship we have with the town of Dillon, I wouldn't expect major savings over on the public safety.
Well, no, I'm saying if we have a year-long COVID, everyone's budgets are being very dramatically. If we have a budget that is going to be impacted beyond our reserve policy, there's going to be some hard spending choices made.
My concern with this is the 25%. That equates on this year's budget. The operating expenditures minus capital is about 3.2 million. That would give us a reserve of 800,000. If the COVID hit in January, we would burn through that. We would lose 800,000 revenue in the first 2 months. I guess I would feel much more comfortable with about a 35%. I don't know about you, Mr. Town Manager, is that something that would be comfortable with you as well?
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable and doable to me.
Because it would still give the flexibility you need as you're going forward. So that would take it up, in the case of this year, would put it up about 1.2 million, I think, is what it would have been.
Which would be about 2.5 of our biggest months.
Yeah.
If they drop completely off the face of it.
What does the council think of that?
Might you take some time, John, and take a look at how that would work and come back to us next time?
I have.
You have looked at 30%, you've already had this discussion?
This is stuff that I heard, yes, numerous times. I'm with Heike, and then when I saw the mayor ask questions about the reserve, I contemplated. I know these numbers off the top of my head too. I know where our budget numbers are. I know where our tax numbers come in. I might not be precise to the dollar, but certainly to the percentile.
If we're going to discuss that possibility, let me ask a fundamental question beforehand. There should be a need to tap the reserve fund. What mechanism would we use? Would it be a council vote, a simple majority, and what's the remedy for restoring it?
Council would have to waive or adjust the policy at that point.
So we'd have actually a resolution on the policy.
Yes.
And then would that include some kind of structure to build it back up? Is that part of that decision-making?
Yeah, my assumption would be we would waive the policy for,
It's all addressed in the resolution draft resolution.
right, we would replenish as soon as we can, within three fiscal years in the policy. Now, that would be something we would be discussing if we came forward to ask for the waiver.
So that's the point where we would discuss whether we feel that 3 fiscal years is reasonable or not.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, COVID, 3 fiscal years is reasonable. Eisenhower tunnel collapses, it's a different story.
Is there any adverse effects that, and you mentioned you had thought about this a lot, is there any adverse effects in being able to spend money sooner rather than later with increasing the percentage of the reserve? So would we be foregoing any projects that are of significant desire to increase this fund first?
Well, we're pretty much there, at 35% right now. We're actually sitting at close to 5 million in our various bank accounts and our various funds at this moment.
But what I'm trying to get at, right, is we're not sitting here basically saying we're either gonna increase the reserve or we're gonna do this project.
Well, yes, we always are. That's always going to be a question. At this point, it's not increase the reserve so much as maintain this reserve or choose another project.
Okay, thank you.
Which is to say that that capital project couldn't be executed until we continue to build the fund, right? Beyond what we
right
are
now,
now.
anything we planned requires any changes.
Nothing right now.
Yes, but maintaining that fund balance will require us to give up something in the future.
Or it
But it might not be, obviously, it's a choice of keeping the money or spending the money. We can always find a way to spend the money. So we will be making the choice to keep this money rather than spend it. It's not going to throw anything we're planning or thinking about.
Okay, so that was what I was trying to get at, so thank you. I guess what I was trying to get at is if we approve this increase that has been thrown on the table here, we're not gonna all of a sudden go and talk about the Brightwood sidewalk and be like, well, now we don't have enough money.
No.
What's the current general fund balance?
I'll give that to
I think it's somewhere north of about 2.4, 2.5 million.
That's what I would guesstimate, something like that.
I like the
And
accurate.
growing.
So at the end of May, it was 2.127.
Which is the equivalent of what percentage?
About 66% of our total annual operating budget for the general fund.
Question? Question. Is that the challenge we have is that we're still kind of a little bit in startup mode. We have a number of projects that we are talking about. We don't have a history, so it's hard to relate, well, we got plenty of funds but we haven't spent it because we haven't done it. We have big projects.
Yeah.
So I'm a little worried about the idea of, well, let's just raise it when we know we might need it. Because I know we're looking at things like facilities, we're looking at things like sidewalks, and I'm just nervous about going higher.
We're not really raising it. At this point, we don't even have a policy. So what we have is just our.
Well, we've already discussed raising it from 25 to 75.
I'm looking at the 25 to 35.
Yeah. And it's a balance of, yes, we have projects done, but we're all still off from COVID.
And,
So it sounded like, and I don't want to put words in the mayor's mouth and the manager's mouth, but it sounds like the reason to potentially talk about this increase is that when potential emergencies or issues that could impact this and require the need for a reserve could happen, right? And January is the example that I heard, is that if it's during one of our really busy months, that is where a significant part of our revenue comes from. It could have a significantly different impact than, say, happens during a shoulder season when we might not even notice the blip. So that's what I understood.
That's exactly the point. In our situation, is significantly different than the county standards folks and everything everyone look at, because our revenue is so driven to December, January, February, March, those 4 months. And that's what my concern is. 800,000 is less than 2 months of revenue in a particular year. Carol?
So it remains true, however, that before we start any kind of capital project in the future, we will take a look, regardless of what's in the reserve fund. I'm not sure we need to make it a higher percentage.
And I will make it work either, it will make it work either anyway. And, you know, the mayor is giving this complete and utter, and I am too, a complete and utter breakdown of all revenues, going from $500,000 to absolutely $0 over a month or a several month period. And there's still going to be April revenue. There's still going to be a minimum of $80,000-$90,000 a month just local spending on local things here. If we're locked down, our restaurants are going to take off with home deliveries and issues like that. So
in our community, our restaurants are going to close, just like it did in COVID.
Well, I would recommend they not. To tell the truth, other resort communities, Grand Lake had its best revenue year ever in the COVID year. Because people left their cities, if they're going to be isolated, they're going to be isolated somewhere where I can go hike in the woods. And
So what is it? You know, I can definitely see what the mayor and manager are saying, but I honestly don't see a big difference between 5%, right? And I think that there is some definitely some concern from both council members here, but then also some citizen comments about operating in a reserve at a higher level than necessary, right? And I guess what I'm really struggling at is like what's necessary, like what would be the impact if we didn't increase the reserve?
If we
don't. It depends on the month. If
it's insurance.
Yes, but what are we talking about? Town staff?
No, snowplow on your road.
Okay.
Massive potholes that form over the winter being filled that summer. Issues like that.
Yeah,
Police services.
I'm comfortable with staying at 25 and reevaluating if we need to in the future.
Let me make an alternate look. We haven't talked about the capital reserve. The capital fund is solely funded by the general fund. So I question whether we even need a capital reserve. Most towns, they have they have additional funding sources that go into a capital fund. We don't. It's only funded by the general fund. So if you eliminated the capital fund, then you would have, and kept the 25%, you would just address, that would be a double support. If you had an emergency where you had to expend capital, you would have the general fund dollars to be able to do it. If you have an emergency like a COVID, you would have the dollars as well. So the difference is now we're down to $200,000 difference.
And if I can weigh in on something, I guess I am fine with whatever number you set, 35 or below. Please don't go above that. And it's, I will keep a higher reserve because they're, at budget season, we'll be planning on, well, can we do this project next year? So this is our minimal, we're setting our minimal level that we feel for a complete breakdown of everything if we've spent all our money with no real plan on saving for projects in the future anyways. So we'll be safe, whatever number we pick. It's just what sort of, do you want us to push forward now with more visible projects, or do you want us to build a slightly higher safety cushion at this point right now? That's the question.
Could I ask?
$50,000 doesn't make that much difference.
Could I ask that? I think that there seems to be a lot of different opinions here. Could we support as written the 25%? Is anyone opposed to that?
And are you proposing that we would support this 25% now and perhaps revisit after the first months of 2026? Is that?
I don't even want to put a time on it, but sure, revisit in the future.
It's council's decision. I will vote against it because I don't feel it's fiscally prudent to do that, but that's fine. I mean, it's a council decision.
To do 25% as opposed to 35.
Yeah, I didn't understand, I'm sorry, your second proposal, you explained that. what you
On the
said.
capital fund, the only source of revenue for the capital fund is the general fund. So what this would require is us to put dollars from the general fund into the capital fund in advance and have them sit there. All right?
So is that essentially 50% of doing that?
No. She's recommending $250,000 to go into the capital fund. It's all funded by a single source, that's the general fund. I don't think we need a capital fund at all. Use the flexibility of the general fund to be able to cover emergencies as well. So you would use that, whether it be 25 or 35%, would be used to cover emergencies that happened on the capital infrastructure side. It would cover the catastrophic COVID type event.
So what does that work out to as far as the actual change here that
The
you're
actual change in
considering?
dollars would be if you went to 35 versus 25. This proposal would put about $1,050,000 into combined the capital fund and the general fund. If you got rid of that capital fund requirement and just kept it all in the general fund and raised it to 35, that would go to $1.2-ish million.
I would personally be against that, and I think the reason why is I think that it's really important for us to identify capital natures of budgets and that there is specific earmarked money for that. And just the way I've seen political spending growing up and then also in my professional career, it's important to have that capital expenditure called out. Otherwise, it's very easy, not necessarily saying we will do this, but a future council or a future mayor could support the use of general funds for things that might not necessarily be supporting those capital assets that we may have in the future.
But remember, we have a 2% lodging tax fund, which is also for infrastructure and capital.
Help me out, Peggy. Where do these base recommendations come from? You said 16% for reserve of the general fund is probably the norm, 16.5%, and you're recommending a higher 25% based on?
Yeah, so GFOA's recommendation is basically 16%, which is 2 months. I went a little higher than that, based on, we're heavily based on tourism. and I think that's where Ken wants to go higher. Keep in mind that the policy is just a floor, so when we do our budget and the budget's approved, you'll see where those funds are. So we can always save more. So it doesn't mean that that's all we're going to put in reserves and the rest needs to be spent. It's just a floor. And it's up to you. I mean, they're sort of like one and the same. What you guys are talking about, raising it to 35% and taking out the 250 for capital improvements versus leaving that 25% with the 250. They all kind of equal the same. It does all come out of the general fund. So however you guys want to, however you want that.
Because if you have that capital fund, then you would be required to put $250,000 into a capital fund that would not be used on a normal basis.
Right, that would be restricted and reserved for a capital improvement.
And then is there an ability to, in the case of an emergency, to move that money back to the general fund?
We have that option written into us, right?
Yeah, so this is, so this is policy just to keep, so we know what we're doing and then to keep future boards from spending our reserves. But ultimately, whether this policy exists or not, you still have the ability as a council as a whole to amend it. So even though we say, let's say 35%, if next year comes around and something happens, and council wants to use that money, let's say that we've used, anything in excess of that, it's your guys' vote to amend it, and we can use that money with, the policy's written that we have to have a plan to pay it back. And it's really just a safeguard. It's a safeguard just to make sure that we have funds and they're not all spent within 1 year. There are local governments that do not have a reserve policy, and there are local governments that do, and some are less conservative and some are more conservative. So it just it's based on you. And this policy, right now, I think it's written that it's reviewed every 3 years, but we can review it every year. I know it's a little bit tough because we are new and we're just getting started, but it can always be modified. Like we can change that so it says reviewed every year, and that based on where we are financially, you guys can choose to increase it or decrease it. But it's a floor to keep us safe and to make sure that we have liquidity and that we're not using all of our fund balance in a given year.
There's a sense of the council there.
I'll throw in, I kind of modify my thinking. I actually am leaning more to what Mr. Mayor has suggested, and because I think the capital fund will be one that, if there was an emergency, if there was COVID, we'd probably be cutting out capital. We would need that flexibility in the general fund. But keeping it going to the 35% of the general fund would probably be okay.
And if I can weigh in, as our finance director pointed out, this is a policy that you can change. So what this really is if we come to a situation where a reserve requirement is too high because we need that money, it just causes the council, whoever they may be at the time, to take 2 looks at it. They have to change a policy, then they have to approve that spending. It's just kind of a wait, we're stepping into what can be slightly dangerous ground. Let's make sure we thought this through.
In fact, there's 2 ways council could address that. One way is look at it and say, all right, here's the 3-year plan to get back to whatever that reserve number is. The other way, the council could simply reopen the reserve policy and lower it with no requirement to get back up to the 35 or 25%. Councilmember Carroll.
I confess, I put a lot of thought into this when I did the reading, was ready with a few questions and a decision. And so throwing all these new numbers, not my forte to run with all these changes. I think all the arguments I've heard suggest that our finance director has proposed a conservative approach that has enough flexibility for us to remember that we formed this town so that we could show some actual changes in this town. And yet, at any time, if we want to revisit this, we can do that. And I thoroughly recommend that we go with finance director's recommendation for an annual review, at least this first year, maybe not forever. But we are a startup. We're not in the dark, but there's some murky clouds around.
I'm just looking to give the town manager more flexibility, particularly on the capital reserve fund side. Give him the flexibility and us the flexibility to be able to, if we have a capital emergency that we have to dip in, then we have the ability to move the money there. If we have a COVID type event, we have the ability to use the money there.
And I agree with the mayor on this, that it's important that we discuss the reserves in each thing, but I think just one reserve pool will solve our problem. If we buy this place and the boiler goes out, we'll find the money to replace the boiler.
Will there be any realized benefits, insurance-wise, negotiating-wise, or whatnot, to having a designated and called-out reserve for capital that would help us? Like, would there be any reason that we might get an insurance break if we have a designated capital fund?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So the question on the table is, do we have them in both funds, number one at 25%, or do we have it in just one fund, general fund, at 25 or 35? Is that what's on the table?
Right. So, in that case, why don't we just take a straw vote of where we'd like it to go? And those were the three options were
As presented.
as presented. All those as presented, raise your hands. 3.
Four.
4.
So as presented.
3 and 4.
All right, then let's go to the next one, which would be, could you, well,
It's review of the year. That's the
Review
other
year,
item.
yes.
yeah, review in a year?
Well, let's get through that. So the second one would be 25.
Well, no.
No, we already voted.
First.
Okay. Okay.
But you could, all right. Yeah, because
So that's maintaining the 250,000 in the as a capital reserve.
But we don't take any formal votes in the work session, so I would like to hear you present the final two options regardless of whether.
All right. The second option would be 25%, no capital reserve, and a 25% of general fund reserve.
Do you think we could get an informal vote on including the review process in a year, regardless of which decision is made?
Can we come back to that as soon as we finish these? I think the answer is going to be yes.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I just would like to see that as part of the official proposal.
Well, we're just considering this one aspect of it first.
So the options are as is, which is a 25% reserve fund, 250,000 capital fund.
And that would
Yeah.
require $250,000 be removed from the general fund and put into the capital fund.
Which I kind of recommend against. Our second option is a 25% reserve fund with no capital reserve. And the third option we've been discussing is 35% with no capital reserve.
Right, so,
So you recommend as the first one?
I don't think we need to have 250,000 capital reserve fund.
So you're not recommending the first one?
I'm not recommending the first one.
Just said you did. You're not recommending it.
Yeah, I recommend the second or the third, just a general fund reserve of 25 to 35%.
I'll change my vote. I'll go for number 2.
So what's the next step here? Do you come back with a resolution?
Yes, do
Is it possible that you would do a resolution, run the numbers in the next couple of weeks, and then come back to us with what those numbers would be for 25 versus 35%?
Okay.
Or maybe
We're at 3.2, so 25% is 800,000, 35% is,
1.2
yeah,
station.
yeah. So about a $400,000, $350,000 difference. Yeah, about just under a $350,000 difference.
which is decidedly more than the 250 that was going to be in the capital fund.
Well, if you combine, the first option had an $800,000 general fund reserve and a $250,000 capital reserve for a total of $1,050,000. But the first option would have required this year. The second option would require $800,000 in the general fund, period. And the third option would require $1.26 million in the general fund.
A minute ago you said 1.6, is it 1.26? Okay, which is decidedly more than the 250 plus 25%.
25%, 250 plus 25% is 1.05 million.
Right.
Yes, 200,000 more.
Yeah, 200,000.
So, given that, let's start over. Who would prefer the original proposal, 800,000, roughly 25%, which equates to 800,000 plus 250,000 capital reserve? All right. Second option, who would prefer a 25% general fund reserve, which equates to this year, which would be equated to $800,000. See any hands? All right. The third option would have been a 35% general fund reserve, which this year would equate to approximately $1.26 million. And no capital fund reserve. All right. Now going back, the review policy, the review time, changing the review time from 3 years to 1 year. Who all would favor that? All right.
Much more conservative than these guys.
The next item, short-term rental code update. And with that, Mr. Town Manager.
Ooh, and I will let our town clerk, Madeline Seaver, take this one.
All right, so I know that we are a little bit short on time. I am going to give a brief bit of background of how we got here, just because I know we have a lot of folks in the audience online and in person who are interested in this conversation. I just want to make sure that we've got clarity on what's being discussed. So at the end of the 2024-2025 short-term rental season, we kind of reviewed the operations of short-term rental licensing and came to council in April to talk about a brief overview of the season. After that, we had a series of listening sessions as well as a survey that went out to different Keystone community members. We had over 30 people participate in those listening sessions, and we had over 100 responses to those surveys with feedback about the short-term rental process. We presented this feedback to Town Council in early June, and in that presentation, we identified kind of 4 main categories of things that kind of consistently popped up and were able to be kind of classified in these categories. We had parking, life safety issues, issues of the resort zone, and questions of enforcement and the use of the hotline. Some of these issues, like the resort zone, we talked about revisiting during the discussions of the land use development code, because that's where this part of the short-term rental regulations comes in place. So the discussion today is really about items that could be amended in the short-term rental code specifically. And so that's the ordinance that we would have adopted last year, and specific changes that might get to some of the conversations that we had in early June. We've also talked about the enforcement and hotline issue, and talked about ways that we're going to work on improving that in the future, and are working with both our current provider and our provider for the licensing software to develop a new process moving forward for that. So based on this conversation that we had in June, we did receive some feedback from Town Council where individual council members emailed staff to share their feedback because we were limited in time at that work session. So based off of that, if there were things that we've received multiple comments about and were able to be addressed in the short-term rental code, we kind of put those all together in a potential ordinance. So council can consider all of these things, one of these things, none of these things. Those are all options. One thing that did not make it into this specific proposed ordinance were the issue of the life safety checks. The life safety standards and the short-term rental code are clearly outlined and are clearly required of people. In the current application process, we just require people to sign off acknowledging that they've met all of the short-term rental code requirements. That would be included in this. I think without making updates to the code, or requiring additional sign-offs from the fire department or other things like that, I believe that we could just add a check mark to the application that more explicitly requires a sign-off to these life safety standards. If this is not sufficient to Town Council, we can bring back a version of the ordinance that covers that. But I believe based off of the feedback that we've heard, that that would be sufficient. The things that we have outlined in this ordinance are the following. The first is requiring responsible agents to provide a direct number that they can be reached at. This is a change to ask that they provide a direct number that doesn't go through a phone tree or an operator. This created a lot of difficulties with the hotline and with staff trying to reach out to the responsible agent. So requiring this would kind of eliminate that confusion and have a direct line that they can be reached at. The second thing is requiring a submission of a parking diagram. During the last council session, we talked about concerns with parking enforcement and parking being an issue that continues to come up. Currently, our requirements are simply that they need to have at least one parking space. And then they just submit the number of allowable parking spaces. So if we wanted to have anything beyond that, that could include a submission of a parking diagram. The third thing was the implementation of a parking pass, and many people already provide a parking pass for their guests upon check-in. And this would just require specific information on that to kind of help with the complaint process, including a short-term rental license number, the responsible agent's contact number, and then I think there's some clarity needed about the details of the town's complaint process. This is really just intended to be either that hotline phone number or a direct link to be able to provide that, provide people the link to the complaint process. We kept that language vague because the development of the hotline and how that's functioning is continuing to evolve. So those are the current things that are laid out on the table, and I think staff would just like to hear what directions town council would like to go in.
John?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, kind of rapid fire. So, will staff be reviewing the diagrams that are submitted under this proposal?
We would review them to ensure that they've been submitted, but it wouldn't be saying, yes, this is valid, or no, this is not valid.
So would it be safe to say it's not going to be a significant time crunch or draw from other aspects of your role?
No, there are 2,000 licenses. And what she is going to review is that what's shown on the plan is an actual parking space. We won't be able to confirm that there are trees growing up through it or things like that, but it's still 2,000 separate documents that our town clerk is going to have to at least look at and make high-level determinations on what they're showing. That's a significant amount of time.
So I can definitely see the need for different diagrams for different areas, but is it realistic to say that there would be 2,000 completely different pictures or diagrams? There's some HOAs that have shared or unassigned parking spaces where, quite honestly, one parking diagram for all of those could in theory suffice.
Yes, let me explain a little bit why we even, if my memory serves, why we had this discussion. And it's to get the short-term rental owners to actually put thought into the fact, are they able to provide parking to their renters? Whether we get 500 of the same maps, she still has to look at all 500 of them.
So we can safely say there was some concern, and the reason I'm asking this is there was some concern about the workload that could go into this, right? There are several communities that I'm just thinking in the town, like already I was going through my brain here, that one diagram would be good for several hundred units potentially in there.
No, because it would be the same diagram for each unit. It wouldn't be one diagram for several hundred units. The whole purpose for this is to get the unit owner to be aware of parking restrictions that they might have with their unit before they're telling people you can bring 4 or 5 cars here.
But presumably, the duty of the clerk is not to evaluate it, just like, well, it looks like they made a parking diagram. And if issues come up, then you look closer, right, to minimum, you don't want all that overhead time.
No, exactly. She's not going to go into depth in each diagram. She will go into depth if we have complaints about how the parking is occurring at this unit. Then we pull out the diagram and we say, you lied to us when you submitted this diagram. You're going to be losing your STR license at the renewal period. But she will confirm that it's not just a box drawn on a piece of paper saying, yeah, I have parking, here it is.
That makes sense.
Generalities are hard to deal with. Let's give 2 specifics. What would be River Run, where, as I understand, they have underground parking. So we would be expecting a single owner to give in a copy of some kind of diagram of that parking schematic. So at a quick look, it looks like, oh, there's plenty of parking, right? I'm asking.
Yeah, and we would expect their neighbor to probably give the exact same diagram.
So my point is, at what point does that become useful information that we act on?
When when there is an issue and we go investigate the issue and we say, you identified 1 parking spot and this lot is yours being able to use. We've had multiple complaints about 2 cars parking in this parking lot where you identified 1 spot. You lied to us about your parking capabilities.
So I guess what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is I'm imagining the same situation with River Run or any of those other areas that have underground unassigned parking. And in my mind, right, a diagram that shows an arrow to the parking garage entrance and then saying parking in an open spot would suffice for that, but it sounds like that would not, according to this.
No, it would suffice for that.
Okay.
And
Until.
what happens is when they lie about it, when their diagram is indicating the spot they don't have or don't have access to. Say the HOA has a rule that only owners can park in this area. They've identified to us that's their parking lot for STRs. We're not going to go into depth on that on the application. We're going to go into depth on that when we get complaints from the owners saying there are short-term renters parking in our spots.
Okay, that makes sense, and that's something I'm comfortable with. I just don't want to be unrealistic with our HOAs who currently operate unassigned parking structures.
Question, would it make more sense to require in the packet that is provided to the renter that diagram of where they can park versus the diagram coming to the town? So that way the clerk wouldn't have to receive it. But in my experience, the major problem that we have is the renters don't know where to park. At least they could have been provided that information before the complaint goes into the hotline or somewhere else.
Well, we have to ensure that they have one spot.
Right.
That's why we need this.
You need both of those things.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that when we go, let's say Pines HOA says, like, right, here's our service lots. You can park X many vehicles anywhere in this unassigned parking. And here's a copy to all of our owners for their rentals. So they're gonna all submit the same thing. One STR renter isn't also gonna say, well, hey, look, they made this for me, of course they're gonna give it to them. And of course, we would ask them to give it to any renter, because they want the renter to know where to park. But the whole point here is to have diligence to ensure that they go through those steps. And then if there's an issue, be able to validate, like, all right, where lies the issue?
I guess my concern is having to have 2,000 licenses, with each license having to have the same, or having to have a parking diagram that staff has to look at each time. And when in fact, you're gonna have, like in the Pines, they have 144 units. You have similar number in Silver Mill. I see Paula here, 45, 46 units in. 44 units in tennis townhomes. For a rental management company, that having to replicate that for every license seems like a lot of duplicative work.
It's easy. It's the same map. They just attach it with all their applications, or if they do multiple applications in one packet, it still will be, that map will be assigned to each property in that application. Each application has to have a map showing that they have parking. And that's a whole lot easier to enforce than the requirement that it be in the packet for renters, because we have no way to check what's in the packet for renters unless there's a problem that occurs at such a high level where we're investing significant amount of time. I don't think this is a difficulty for, they're not identifying, especially in shared parking lots, they're not identifying a particular spot. They're sending the simple map of their property showing these are the parking spots available. One of these parking spots is available for this unit.
And I guess I'll go back to Councilman Higginhouse question to the clerk earlier. Do you see having this requirement as increasing the workload of the SDR license renewal process over the application process?
I think it will inherently lead to some increase in time, yes. I think one thing I will say is the renewal license process, from when it came over from Summit County to the renewal license process as we manage it now has already gotten significantly easier for property managers to fill out that process. The paperwork has reduced. There's a bulk process for them to do that, and it would be adding in an attachment field where they would just drag and drop it into that attachment for each license. But I've received feedback from all of the property management companies that on the whole, the renewal process has already gotten significantly less time consuming for them.
And as far as our clerk's time, I think making SDR owners aware that parking is an issue, that alone is worth the additional time she'll put into this.
So let's go back to another, for instance. So if someone comes to you for a new or renewal, and they indicate that they can park 5, are you looking for a map that shows 5 specific? Are you going to do that to make that comparison and find out if there are indeed 5 parking spaces on the property without using town?
No.
So my question is, because it seems to me what I hear from the problems at your workshops were people who have more than the 1 or 2 that are expected, and they bring a party, they have a wedding, they have multiple teenagers come with them, each one with a car. How will this system address that problem? I just don't understand the cost of that.
And so we get a complaint that there are 20 cars. Well, first of all, if they're parked legally, it's not a problem. Okay? If they're parked legally, it's not a problem.
That's what I'm thinking is the answer.
Yeah.
Right.
If they're parked illegally, we can then have a document saying, you show this as your parking, your renters are not parking, they're parking where they're not supposed to, they're not parking.
We need that document though. If they're parking illegally, if they're either on somebody else's property or out there on a town road.
No, I think this needs a lot more clarity. This is not about legal versus illegal parking at all, because the law says you can park X many vehicles per your permit. It's not about where it is legal to park a vehicle. So if they're in violation by having too many vehicles.
Or if their problem is they're allowed 5 vehicles.
Yeah.
They gave us a diagram showing parking for 5. In reality, they have parking for 2.
Yeah.
So every time they have a renter, they have 3 cars parked somewhere where they're not supposed to be parked. And we keep getting complaints that this unit is parking cars in our parking spots in situations like that. We can go at that point, then we look at this document in depth and go compare it to what's actually on the ground and say, you showed all this parking on your property, 3 of the spots are filled with 40-year-old trees. You lied on your application to us for your short-term rental license, there are going to be repercussions.
So this comes down to a remedy if there are complaints. Do I understand that correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
Other comments?
Simple question. What are we really just requiring from the document? Is this going to be I'm thinking about the individual that has 2, a driveway.
If I had a house, I would turn in a hand-drawn thing. If I were renting a condo, I would turn in my condo map.
Okay, I just wanted to, yeah.
So it sounds like it's kind of like the checkoff for like safety. We're expecting the owner to be honest, say, yes, I have looked at each of those life safety, and yes, I actually have those parking spaces. I've designated them.
Yes.
I don't see it as a life safety issue.
No.
It's
No,
not
the checkoff process
the owners,
is the
it's
checkoff
more than
process.
that, it's accountability if we find out they're routinely violating, which we, and we need to have some.
Or currently finding out the hard
way. Yes,
I
You
do-
have to be able to cross-reference it and back up the people who have a unit next door, whose spots they're parking in, and thinking they're gonna get away with it. for the-
I don't disagree.
I think the point was, we expect them to be honest.
Yep.
And we only validate when there's a complaint, but we have to have something on file to validate against.
So in essence, what you're saying is when the application comes in and is processed, the document in essence wouldn't really be evaluated until those complaints came in and they'd look and say,
It would be a very high-level evaluation. Is this a document that shows parking at this location?
now, I guess if we do this, I would like to ask the clerk to work with the rental management companies to find a way to facilitate it and not put an undue amount of extra work on them to submit the requirement.
If I may, working previously somewhere that had almost a property in every single location, these maps already exist. Like, they're already made, they just have to tweak it a little bit.
They should.
Should be.
All right. Are we okay with requiring a parking diagram with the application?
And/or a policy, because as was pointed out by some of the residents who wrote in, they might not have specifically a sign, but it might be a diagram or a policy indicating, I don't know how to, or it might be a diagram of the whole association with a note that there aren't specifically assigned spots. I don't know, but we need to address the fact that some are different policies than others versus I have spot 71 and 72.
Yeah, and that's easy.
The policy is already required under the current code.
It shouldn't be rocket science. This is what it is.
Yeah, I think that the note though, and we did get a few public comments about the unassigned parking, I think that that's a very reasonable thing for them to ask for, and it's very reasonable for us to work with them on that, right? You don't need to require HOAs to break up all the unassigned into specific or required parking spots. That's ridiculous. But so I think that we're kind of on the line though, it sounds like.
So it sounds like we're okay with it as a requirement to be, the map to be added with that basic to the policy. Am I right? All right. Next.
The requirement of responsible agents to provide a direct number they can be reached at.
Yes, give us a thumbs up.
Have you heard any pushback, any indications that that's unreasonable?
I have not gotten any comments to that nature at this time.
Is the plan to define direct number? And I guess my concern is, sure, you can have a direct number to a company that answers the phone and then forwards it to another one, or is them gonna call it? Or would that be considered okay, or does it have to be in the sense of a direct line to like my cell phone that would wake me up if I was the responsible agent?
And I can answer this one. It would, if you have a phone service who's calling you, the phone service becomes the responsible agent. Okay, just like in Summit Cove, you will call, use it as an example. You would call, they probably have the same number for all of their call-ins from STRs, I'm not sure of this, but then they have different employees who they assign out on various things. So if you were operating a phone service, they would be the responsible agent at 1 in the morning.
I'm just thinking, right, and I've used this with like technical assistance before. Sometimes you'll call somebody and get a hold of them and they're in a call center somewhere, right? Probably not even remotely close here. And then they call somebody who's actually boots on the ground over here that can do it. Are we considering that meeting the standard?
Well, the call-in, we have to have the number you call in be responsible for getting the problem solved. And if what happens is you call into a number, they drop the ball. They don't get in contact with
The boots on the
the
ground.
boots on the ground. We can't blame the boots on the ground for that. There has to be a responsible agent who's,
And can we hold a responsible agent accountable if they operate a call center, say in Indiana?
we can hold the homeowner responsible if they hire that call center as a responsible agent, and the responsible agent is not able to solve the problems.
As I remember the discussion, correct me, Maddie, if this is correct. The discussion was tremendous frustration with calling into a central number that then forwarded you to another number and no one answered.
Correct, and this is defined in the proposed ordinance as all phone numbers must be direct phone numbers that connect callers to a specific individual or extension directly without utilizing a switchboard operator or auto attendant. But the responsible agent could still be a company that is reaching out to you.
Okay.
Procedures enough.
Yep. We okay with that?
Yes.
All right. See?
Then the final consideration was the requirement of a parking pass.
What drove that? For that specific information, because most HOAs have that requirement already for parking passes if they're going to park on their property. And in fact, they have more information required than what you called out. In fact, the information you called out really isn't tremendously useful to them to determine if there's a problem.
So this would help with specifically submitting complaints through the town's complaint process and having a short-term rental license number associated with it and the contact information for the responsible agent who's responsible for solving the issue.
Yeah, I respectively disagree that this would not help in solving the problem. I mean, if there's 10 cars parked there, how am I going to determine that this car belongs to this STR and this car belongs to this STR?
If you already most HOAs,
Well,
a large HOA,
regardless of what most HOAs do, I think that should be different than what we look at, and we've done that multiple times
understand,
before.
but you do, unless you have the unit that's rented, identified, and the duration of the rent, you have no idea whether this is in violation or not.
So they can go above and beyond. They should go above, they could go above and beyond. We're not requiring that. What we're requiring is information that can be used to make a complaint about the violation.
But you have no idea that a violation has occurred.
Then they should increase the information.
I think Mayor's a good point. We need the information that's on here and additional information. That way our code enforcement officer who might be going around and going like, what's going on here? Can look and see like, oh wait, these are expired. Or these are all associated with the same unit. I mean, you could do that by the short-term license number. But I honestly don't give two hoots what most large HOAs doing, because we need one policy to work for the town.
Understand?
So the mayor's point that we need enough information to be able to have our code enforcement officer look at that and go like, there's an issue, or someone who is wondering if they should call a hotline to look at that and say like, oh yeah, there's like 8 cars here. They all have the same number, they're expired and they're still parked here. I think that you're absolutely right, that information needs to also be on there.
I would be in support of that.
I agree, we need the unit number. We need the end date of the rental period. I'm not sure if we need the complaint process, because the renter or somebody walking by would not know whether that's a legitimate place or not for them to park. On the other hand, the other side of the coin is, so I advertise for 5 parking places. My renters show up with 7. There's only going to be 5 passes. How do we, this is not going to address those 2 additional ones that are parking willy-nilly. So I don't know that passing out complaint numbers on cars is going to solve the problem.
I just kind of backing up a little bit. I'm trying to figure out what we're trying to solve. Because I'm thinking, if you're in an HOA, there's a bunch of parking, our code enforcement guy is not gonna go underground and start looking. You know, if there's if somebody has one rental, and they have 2 parking lots, and they rented it, and the renters show up and there's 2 cars there already, then they're gonna call probably and say, well, wait a second, I need to park there. If it's on the street, it's illegal. I mean, and I don't care if they have a pass or not. It's illegal. So I still try to figure out what we're
Dan,
saying.
if they're parked on the street illegal and they've got a parking pass because the STR told them that that was fine, we absolutely need to know that information so we can go back to the license. Because you're right, what's truly wrong is that they're parking illegally. But if it's being enabled because we have someone who's telling them that's okay because they want to put more people in the unit or more people showed up and they're like, all right, well, here's some more passes we made up for you. That information is actionable. And no, we aren't going to have code enforcement officers going into the underground parking looking for problems, but if there's a report, then yeah, they would go under there. And because while the HOA can enforce it, they're in violation of the STR license. So absolutely, code needs to have some way to
I don't, if they're parked illegal on the street, I don't care. We're gonna take them.
Yeah, you do care. You're going to ticket them for parking illegally, and you're going to address the STR issue that is creating it.
But the STR issue is created only if the STR owner has given a pass, more passes than there are places. I don't think that's human behavior. Human behavior is they're going to park without identifying what unit they're in. And those are the complaints that we heard during those listening sessions. People parking and you don't know who they are or where they belong. Or maybe they're just visiting something.
Well, there also could be a situation where people are parking in spots where they're not supposed to be. In good faith, they intended that they were parking in the right spot and they're not supposed to be there. And so it's not this send out the cavalry, get the code enforcement out. It's just a simple, hey, your car's here. It's not supposed to be here, and then they can contact the agent or the renter. I think that and I'm going to go back to what Ken and Aaron were mentioning. I've been thinking about the need to provide, dare I say, customized permits for every single renter. And I'm changing my opinion on that. I think that the current way it's written, right, allows for STR owners to make a single pass that can be reused, can be available in buying when you get here, that can be put in your car and taken out. And my concern with the customized versions, if you will, that include check-in and check-out dates, is that would require a new permit to be created each time by the responsible agent and not allow for just like a pass that's in there and can be displayed on the car.
Almost. You can make the template and then you just leave 2 blanks for check and check out. That's what a lot of the HOAs already do.
If I may,
Don't do that.
Yes, they do. The Pines does that.
No, the rental management companies provide.
Sure, but
Do that.
that's correct.
The owners have owner passes. For STRs, the rental management companies or the responsible agent would be responsible for putting it out.
If I may weigh in just as an example, at my 140 unit condo, the owners get 1 pass. It's a hard plastic pass with a holographic sticker on it, so it cannot be copied or used. Because we have enough space for the people who are staying in the building, whether it's the owner or the renter. We don't have enough spaces for an owner to come park and ski and a renter parking there too. So our passes have our room number and that's the only information. So there are other situations and we find it works very well.
But that's the HOA decision, not the town, right?
Yes, which is what I'm really coming to. Back to Councilman Sullivan's question, what are we trying to solve here, a town problem or an HOA problem?
I would argue that at times it is a town problem. I was driving around the gorgeous Loveland Pass Village this weekend and ran into a constituent. We started talking and we noticed down the street this beautiful house that was a short-term renter had cars all up and down the parking. And far beyond what should have been parked there, right? And if they had those passes in there, then you would be able to know exactly the STR that these are related to, and you could complain there. So I think that, you know, we can say that issues only exist in certain areas, or that it's an HOA issue or whatnot, but I think that truthfully, we need to have some kind of policy, and and yes, we don't have an HOA, but I'm concerned with creating too much burden. I think we need to focus on a simple way that a responsible agent can just print off 1,000 of these things. Maybe it's a piece of paper, right, with this car is for this unit or something, like whatever it could be. We really need to be focused on a simple process that identifies cars, and this is to Councilman Sullivan's point. I really think what we're trying to get at here is identifying cars that might be in violation of parking and how to get those moved when people are frustrated with them. And I think that's really what we're trying to get at, is how do we know whose car that is to ask them to move.
I think that's a great summary, and again, falling back, we need one process that works everywhere, unless you want to write a regulation that has this rule for that area and that rule for this area.
But let's roll back. Some units like my HOA found a system that works. What would not work is having individual passes for everyone who comes up, because then our short-term renters and our owners would both be trying to park at the same time. So it's not as simple as one size fits all.
So, sorry, can you clarify?
Yeah.
Can you clarify that? I don't understand why owners can't have owners passes. They're not SDR.
Because my condo has enough spots for the people who are in the condos. I cannot, as an owner, come up and park at my condominium if I'm renting that condo out to someone else. And the same issue kind of applies to homes in Level and Pass Village. If you live in Level and Pass Village and you're short-term renting your home, and your short-term renters fill all of your parking spots with their cars, you as an owner don't have a right to go park on the street so that you can walk across to go ski out of the mountain house space.
What does
Yes,
that have
but
to do with this?
That doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't see how that applies to a process that would help us identify violation vehicles.
What if the violation vehicle is an owner vehicle? Because all the short-term renters are in the parking lot.
That's not.
If they're on the road,
They won't have a pass if they're the owner. There's going to be people who are parking who have nothing to do with STRs and are parking illegally. This is a limited effect.
I'm just, the problem is too many people trying to park in too few spots, whether they're STR owners, whether they're homeowners and visitors, whatever it is. And the question is, the Level and Passville example you brought up, they were all parking in the street then, I assume. There's an answer.
But that's legal.
Yeah.
That goes back to my comment.
We don't.
Is
But
it-
they won't, so they write a citation and most of those people are like, I don't care, I'm moving anyway.
And but again, if we don't have a way to identify that call it grouping of vehicles, right? And sure, to Councilman Kerr's point, we might not have enough parking spots, right? But if I see 10 cars and 3 of them have parking permits and the rest don't, I'm gonna make the assumption that those 10 cars are all related to that one, call up that responsible agent and be like, hey, what's going on here? So, I think that really we need to figure a way that we can just inform the public on what these vehicles are associated with, and then potentially figure out a solution based on if they are in violation.
I agree. I don't think the owner discussion even belongs in this. Let's not conflate the issue. All we're trying to figure out is if there are people who are parking where they shouldn't be able to identify that they think that they're parking fine because they've been either informed by the company that is renting the STR to them that they can, or that they are trying to slide under the radar with an expired pass. That's what we're trying to identify. We're not trying to identify owner issues because that's either illegal parking or that's an HOA issue. We're trying to identify consistent issues where there's either a communication issue where the STR is not telling people where to park right, or the STR license holder is telling people to do something they cannot do. And in order to do that, we need to be able to identify whether they're supposed to be there in range, and who they're associated with, and what units, so that a code enforcement officer could look at count, whether it's expired or not, and count like X money per unit, and then be able to associate like, okay, is that, that's associated with this license. And that way there's something to go and look at if a complaint comes through the hotline for town clerk to go and look at apartment map.
We don't want the town policing our HOA. Because when we have plenty of space, we don't get,
But here's the other thing, your solution doesn't necessarily work in large HOAs. Your solution is very good for Loveland Pass Village, but it doesn't solve the problem in a large HOA. Bringing it back to, if we're gonna pass something, it should work everywhere.
Right.
And,
So if someone calls code enforcement instead of the HOA, then code enforcement's going to enforce it anywhere.
well, what are,
If someone wants to
What are
blame
they
the
gonna
HOA
do?
instead, that's fine.
you know, we can't necessarily go in to the HOAs, to their closed parking garages, without consulting with our lawyer and actually possibly even getting, the parking garages are not necessarily the public spaces in an HOA.
I think you're missing the point here. We need one piece of information that applies to literally everywhere. Now, if you don't want to send anyone to enforce, that's fine. You can make that decision. But there needs to be actionable information, whether people are looking at it to be able to make a complaint to the hotline, whether they want to make a complaint to their HOA, whether it's in an area where there's not an HOA, whether it's on open parking, on a surface lot, or whether it's enclosed. You need one set of information that works everywhere. That's all. I'm giving you examples of how it might be enforced, and you're taking it and you're jumping it over to private parking lots that are locked off. Whatever, that doesn't matter. The point is you need it. You need specific information. It's going to work everywhere. If you don't have that, then it's
Correct,
going to
everywhere, and that means everyone who's parking, not just STRs. Because owners and their parties are a problem too. They don't.
But that's not covered in the STR ordinance.
Yeah.
We're talking about STR rules.
I agree 100% about that. So what problem are we trying to solve here? Is it a parking problem or is it an STR problem?
It's an STR generating parking problems. Because we have STRs ordered. Because we have some STRs that unscrupulously rent to people who bring far too many cars and they don't care as long as the money comes in. And you get the situation that Councilmember Aguinaldo, and I've also heard of repeated issues in Loveland Pass Village. But I've seen it elsewhere. Like I've seen it over at the Pines where someone shows up with 8 cars and it's hard to figure out whose car is whose unless you have that sort of information on the cars.
I guess, but you would only have, the way the rental management companies used to work, they would just give you 2 passes. You would then have 6 cars with no passes.
So what is
Well, unless you're individually renting and just making them up.
Not to mention all the security part of it.
Yeah, and
Well, so, okay, what I'm getting at is, what is the issue with creating some sort of document or pass or whatever we want to call it that includes this information, right? If somebody is parking without a pass, the HOA can do whatever they're doing. If they are parking illegally without a pass, right? That person has risked their vehicle, right? Through whatever means it might be, right? We can talk about the 17 different possible avenues it could be. But all I'm seeing, and really I'm struggling to see the true negative here besides a small workflow issue. This information would just help to alleviate some stress with cars that are parked in the wrong spot. And then I guess I'm really just not seeing that, like how that is an issue, right? If I would literally print off 500 pieces of paper and every person that comes gets 2 of them if I have 2 parking spots. They throw it in the front of their car, I have an issue, I'm gonna call that responsible agent and be like, there's a car that's associated with this that's causing an issue, right? All I'm seeing is positive there besides the 10 cents worth of paper that goes there.
the problem is that no one, unless you add, if you're gonna do a parking pass, unless you add the unit number or the association and the unit number and the address and the duration of the rental, there's no way you even know if they're illegally parked.
That's not necessarily for us to manage.
Oh, yes, it is. Because then someone can come in and park, without a duration there. That means that parking pass, who's that little slip of paper, will then transit out, and now we'll have day skiers coming in.
And that's for you as an HOA to manage.
But they have a valid pass that indicates that they're an STR. How do I differentiate that they're an STR versus someone else?
And that's for the HOA to determine, right?
They can.
What we're trying to do is set, from a town perspective, to identify cars that should not be parked in areas and alleviate the pain that those could
But
cause.
we are identifying it. You're actually exacerbating the problem because it would give those cars with only the fact that they have a valid parking, STR parking permit, no one would ever be able to determine in a large condo association that they are even authorized to park there.
Okay, so if we put the dates on it, it solves the issue, right?
But the dates on it and the association.
Okay.
A question, are we worried about the parking spaces that are privately held in an HOA or house? Are we worried about those? Or what are we worried about? What's on the street or what's, or are we gonna go manage HOA parking?
No, I think what we're really trying to get at, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is when cars are in areas they're not supposed to be, being able to identify and communicate with those people.
What areas?
I would argue,
HOA parking lots?
I would
There are
argue
no
public.
HOAs, Woodland Pass Village does not have an HOA.
Okay.
So we need to come up with a way as a town to alleviate the stress that STRs are putting on these non-regulated areas in relation to parking. And it's great that you have an HOA and they regulate it and they have lots of money in K&C, but they don't have that in Woodland Pass Village. It's not regulated, so we need to take into consideration other areas that are outside of HOAs. This isn't just an HOA discussion, this is an STR impact.
Can I weigh in quickly? It's 6:42.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to come to consensus on the council on this issue tonight. Let the town clerk and I reach out again to some of the HOA management companies. Let them identify concerns or problems. We'll delve more into the complaints and details we had on this parking and see how much of a real problem it is compared to possibly a perceived problem. Just for example, the Loveland Pass, all those cars could be towed and you can probably identify the house that they are associated with too, to complain on the STR hotline. But it might not be true. So let us spend a little more time delving into this a little bit and we can keep our evening.
I have two comments. Before we close this out, it's very clearly an issue, and you cannot always identify what rental unit they're associated with, because I see that all the time. I see people park in really weird places and then walk to very different places. And if you didn't see them park, you would have no idea. The other thing I'm gonna say is it sounds like if you want, if the big thing here is, I find it absolutely ludicrous that we find this worth arguing over to this extent, putting this little bit of information on there that could be useful. It's not that burdensome to have a pass that you just then write the date on, because the mayor's right, we do need that information. But here's what I do think. If you really want to have rules, leave it all to the HOAs, or there's HOAs and not, okay, let's talk about that, because this belongs in the STR ordinances, because we inherited Summit County's STR ordinance, which treats the entire town the same, and the entire town is not the same, and now is the time for us to discuss what our residents have been telling us since before we were founded that we need to discuss, which is maybe we shouldn't treat every neighborhood like River Run.
I completely agree with that, and I think that we've talked a lot about a one-size-fits-all approach. I don't think that's what we need to be looking at, and so that, and I know we're getting on time, so that'd be my only guidance to staff when we look to review this, is we will probably not get a one-size-fits-all approach that meets everyone's needs or every situation, right? And so we should probably look at what we can do to differentiate that and look at HOAs versus non-HOAs versus assigned versus non-assigned. And I know it's gonna be a lot of work, but I just think that we're not gonna get even close to a consensus if we try to do a one-size-fits-all approach on this.
I agree.
Is that okay for you?
Town manager, just one point of question here. The other two issues that we got council consensus on are related to the licensing application. And from a timeline standpoint, would we feel comfortable with coming with an ordinance for just those two issues now so that that can get implemented before the licensing?
Yes. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
So it can roll into the cycle.
Correct.
All right. In that case, we will defer discussion of nonprofit donations to task as priorities again. And unless there's an objection, the work session is adjourned and we will reconvene in 15 minutes for